What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're taking a look at Destiny 2 Lightfall DLC here, running on the Steam Deck with Windows 11. Definitely a game I've been wanting to check out for a few months, actually, and I just never got around to it. But with Lightfall, I decided I'd jump in and see what performance is like here for us. And at 720p, 60 FPS cap, and no VSync to start with, but I'm going to kick that on later. Anti-aliasing FXAA, and a mix of low and medium here with depth of field and motion blur turned off is just kind of where we'll get started. And I'll just jump into the tower first. And typically what I'm seeing, whether I'm at low, medium, or even at medium at points, I'm getting around 41 to 60 FPS depending on where I'm at in the game and what's going on, which kind of makes sense for the most part. Of course, 60 FPS is the real sweet spot that I'd like to be at most of the time, but without really bringing things down to the lowest and bringing resolution scale down to something rough, then I can't really get there. Now, if I go in here and go to more of a full medium with screen space reflections and all of that, we can still maintain a decent FPS here while hanging out in the tower. But where I will see it dip is when I jump down here to the same area we were at. Instead of being 55, 60 FPS, we will get down into the 40s. So, you know, by being higher on the settings, we are going to take a hit as we get out into things. But leaving those settings alone and jumping into a little bit of combat here at the beginning of the Lightfall campaign, it actually holds up pretty decent. Like I was saying, still around 41 to 60 FPS, depending on what's going on in the game, you know, amount of enemies and effects and all the stuff that we're up to here, and even depending on planets and maps. But even when we get into more effects and stuff going on screen and more enemies here, it still holds 50 some FPS here in the campaign just in this area. And I thought that was pretty impressive here on Windows for Steam Deck to be able to do this. And it looks really good as well and feels really responsive, and it's really nice to play. I didn't really have any major problems, whether I'm with these more medium settings or lower settings. I can get that 40 to 60 FPS range, which is fine for PvE and campaign and all of that. It's when we get into multiplayer here in a second that it kind of falls apart a little bit more for me, though it is still playable. So jumping over to that multiplayer, I only checked out a couple of maps, and I recorded this one here, and this is at those same settings, and the FPS is going to kind of bounce around. Same thing I've been saying in the 40s to 60, but it just doesn't feel as good in PvP. It feels a little bit clunkier, more stuttery, and more input latency. Of course, we are connected with the other players here and stuff, so it's just not as good of an experience for me as the PvE was. And even if I go in here, turn everything down really low, get rid of the anti-aliasing as well and all of that, it does make a difference. It does increase our FPS a little bit, and more importantly, just the inputs from the controls feel a little bit snappier and a little bit better, but it's still pretty rough when it comes to PvP and playing against other players who are probably at 120 FPS or higher when it comes to that and better input latency. It's very difficult to be competitive, but it is playable if you're wanting to jump into the Crucible and maybe just knock out a couple of easy bounties or something like that you want to pull off. So it's playable and you can see the FPS, but you're going to want to keep things lower than you would maybe in campaign and PvE type stuff, so that you can just get as decent of input latency and FPS as you can if you're going to jump into multiplayer here and Crucible matches for the Steam Deck with Windows. But still impressed that it's even able to run as well as it does and actually be fairly decent here. But as far as the settings, I think I'm mostly just going with here is the 720, 60 FPS, VSync on unless I'm in competitive, anti-aliasing at FXAA, and this mix of medium-low here with depth of field motion blur still turned off, and 100% on the render resolution scale, which I think looks the best even on the smaller screen. If you reduce the render resolution, it does get pretty rough. We're already down to 720p, and I think the game overall with settings like this just runs well enough here on Windows on Deck to be a decent enough experience if it's your only device, or especially if you're away from your main rig or console or whatever that you're playing on, and this allows you to get in and play. But anyways, guys, I hope this gave you an idea about Destiny's performance here on Windows for the Steam Deck. I would like to see them bring support to SteamOS. I think it would run really well over there, and hopefully one day Bungie will do that. But for now, we can get it to run on Windows, or if you want to go the cloud route, you could use something like GeForce Now over on SteamOS, and I'll probably show that in a future video as well. All right, guys, again, thanks a lot for coming to check out the video as always. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.